I have a banger for you today. Today, I'll show you how to forge not one, but two of the essential tools you're gonna need as a beginner blacksmith. Today, we'll forge a rounding punch and also a drift. This is the fourth and final video in my beginner smithing tools series where I show you how to forge all the tools that you're gonna need. So make sure that you watch my other videos if you wanna learn how to make all these tools. First things first, we're gonna start off by forging our rounding punch. For this, we're gonna measure 8 inches around our spring and cut that off. Okay, so we'll go around the outside of the spring. Now we've got our 8 inches, we'll mark that and cut it there. And I do apologize if my footage is a little shaky today. It's very windy and my camera stand is a bit flimsy. Don't forget your PPE. Now I'm just going to chamfer the edges over with my belt sander and we'll chuck it in the forge to heat up. Now we've got a lot to get through, so I'm going to try and keep this as short and sweet as I can. But basically we're going to start by turning the spring into a workable piece of material by straightening it out. I just use the hardy hole of the anvil to do most of the straightening. And then I just use my hammer on the very end to get that piece nice and straight. So now we're going to turn it around and we're going to do the same thing to this end. Back to our hardy hole. Nice. You can see it's still a bit bent. Flatten that out, flatten the tip out. That's pretty good. Try and get this as straight as you can at this point. It'll just make your life easier when you're doing the rest of the forge work. So it's pretty good. Yeah, very good. Now that our material is workable, we're gonna start by forging in the struck end of our rounding punch. So to do that, I'm going to forge about an inch worth of a taper. An inch worth of a taper, what am I saying? An inch long taper, I guess. So we're going to hold our material at an angle off the anvil face and we'll forge in a square taper. Now this doesn't have to be too pretty because this is just a working tool. So now we've got our square taper. We're going to heat it back up and we're just going to forge down those corners and turn it into an octagon. We're nice and hot again. And we'll just finish this up by forging down those corners. And you know when to stop when you know that all the faces are an equal width from each other. See, this side needs a little bit more. Okay. It's looking pretty good. Okay, I'm happy with that. Now at this point, I'm just going to cool the punch off. A little bit. I'm going to cool the punch off, and then I'm just going to cut a flat face off on there with my angle grinder. The reason we're cutting it with an angle grinder is because, as you can see, it creates a bit of a fish mouth effect when you taper down the end. So we're just going to make that nice and flat to reduce any mushrooming when we hit it with the hammer. And now I'm just going to chamfer the sharp edge with my belt sander. Now that the struck end is forged, we're going to flip our workpiece around, stick that in the forge, heat that up, and we're going to start forging out the long taper for the rounding punch. As you would have learnt from the previous videos on my series, we're going to use the horn of our anvil to start tapering out our longer taper. Because it's such a large taper, we really want to forge this out as efficiently as possible. And we forge more efficiently when we're using a round face along with our rounding hammer because it squeezes the material out directionally. Now, because this is spring steel, it is a lot harder to work with than mild steel. So when it gets to a heat like this, you don't really want to forge it. It could actually crack. You want to keep it nice and hot when you're forging it. Got a little bit hot there. That's okay. You really want to use this time to practice getting some power in your swings. The spring steel doesn't want to move very easily. Don't worry if it looks ugly at this point, because we're always going to have time to clean it up. Now I want to get this down so the end is about 10 millimeters, or I don't know what 10 millimeters is in inches. You can tell me in the comments. But we're going to aim so the end of our punch is around 10 millimeters. I think at this point I might actually move on to the flat face of the anvil and start cleaning this up. Now I'm going to move over to the flat face of my hammer, also known as the planishing face, and we'll use that to smoothen everything out on our taper. Now, because my spring's not actually a very wide diameter spring, this is going to be fairly easy for me. I don't know if I'll be able to say the same for you, depending if you have a thicker spring that you're working with. But for me, this is going to be a very easy and quick tool to forge. So now, I'm going to get out any twists, clean this up. Now that we've got a nice square taper, we're going to forge down the corners. Now we're going to turn this into an octagon. Then after that, we're going to forge it round. Now we're just going to carry on this with the flat face of our hammer. We mainly use the rounding face when we just want to move a lot of material quickly. But because this is more of a, we're starting to get into the delicates of the process, that's where I like to move on to the flat face of my hammer. See, it's twisting a little bit there. Now I'm looking at that. I believe I'm gonna give it another heat, just because, well, it is cooling obviously. There's our original square sides of our taper, and you can see that the octagon edges that I just forged in, they're not quite as wide as those original faces. So we know that it's not an octagon, it's more of a square with rounded corners. So we're going to take one more heat, fix that up, and then we'll move on to rounding. Just going to give this a quick sweep off. It's a bit tough to see when it's so hot, but there we go, there's my face. There we go. Now I can see there, well, we're a little bit bowed. Probably fix that up a little bit. But our faces are a lot more even now. So now I'm just going to take this time to knock down those corners again and create whatever has twice as many sides of an octagon. I'm not good with shapes. Okay, we're looking pretty good there. Now, on our next heat, we're just going to true up our circle by heating it up, and then we'll make rotating blows. Pretty light blows, just planishing, and we'll make our movements just like that, and we'll work our way down to the end. Just gonna give it a quick clean off. Okay, and again with our planishing face, because we're not trying to move material, we're just trying to cleanish it, smoothen it up a bit. And you only have to rotate it 180 degrees because as the face of the hammer smoothens out the top, the flat face of the anvil smoothens out the bottom. This is a very, very simple process, but it is a process that you have to practice as a beginner, because I can tell you now, I wasn't very good at it when I first started. Okie dokie, that's looking really, really good. Now, at this point, you want to find any bows or kinks that are in your punch, and you want to straighten those out. It does take a little bit of back and forth, but I'd say it's pretty straight. I'm happy with that. Now at this point, it's time to decide whether you need to anneal the punch or not. Annealing means softening. Now, because I have got power tools, I'm not going to anneal it because there's not a lot of material I have to take off. But if you're only doing this with a file and a hacksaw, I would recommend annealing the steel. I'm not going to go into annealing in this video because we've got so much to get through today, but if you watch the previous videos in the series, I go into depth on how to anneal steel perfectly every time. Now, if you're lucky like me and you have power tools to work with, then I wouldn't really bother annealing the steel. So I'm just going to let it cool for a little bit and then I'll quench it. You don't want to quench it while it's too hot. And then we're going to go over to the belt sander and we're going to clean this up. Now, as I was saying earlier in the video, I'm aiming for about 10 millimeters. So if I go right on the end here, 8.5 and 9.4, I'm a little bit oval. I want to go further down and see where I get to that 10 mil all the way around. About there. So I'm going to cut this, I'm going to cut the punch off over in there. I just gave it a quick mark and then I'm going to chuck it in my vise. So I've got a 40 grit belt on my belt sander, so that's going to chew off a lot of material really easily. Once I get the shape in, I'm going to move down to a finer grit and then just smoothen it out a bit more. So we've got our shape roughed in, now I'm going to move down to a finer grit. You gotta love when a belt breaks halfway through a project. Luckily, I pretty much did everything I needed to do before it broke, so I'm just gonna rip a piece off here and I'm just gonna sand it over by hand and that'll finish that up. So we may have skipped the annealing process on this video, but we are not skipping the hardening and tempering. So we're gonna heat this up in the forge, quench it, and I'm gonna show you how to temper it. Now, we are in a bit of a time crunch for this video because I've got so much to do, but I urge you to watch the first video and the other two on the series because I go into depth on how exactly to harden and temper your tools and what you shouldn't do. So we really want to make sure that we're heating it up to a good critical temperature, not forging temperature, but a nice cherry red, and then we want to make sure we let it sit so it soaks into the center of the tool as well, because when we do quench it, we do not want to crack it, which can happen if you don't heat it correctly. Please don't judge how dirty my quenching tank is. I just spilt all my oil all over the floor on my last video and I had to like scrape it all back in. So, I mean, it's got some stuff in the bottom there, but that shouldn't affect the quench. So now we're at a nice even heat on our punch and we're gonna dip the first inch or so, maybe 1.5 inches in the oil and let that quench. So now that's nice and hard. I'm gonna leave that in there for a little bit. And then for our tempering process, I love doing this because it saves so much time. We can temper it right now. So to do that, we want to scratch off the surface layer so we can see bare metal on the tip of our punch. And we're doing that so we can see the temper colors run down the steel, because we want to, now that this is really hard, it's actually brittle, but we don't want it to be brittle. We want to bring back a little bit of softness. So we're going to watch these colors here. You see where it's dark blue and it turns into a bronze. We want to see that go all the way up to the tip, so we know it's tempered back to a decent hardness. Hopefully you can see that. So this may take a minute or two. Usually takes maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And once we get that bronze color on the tip, we're going to quench it again to stop the tempering, and we will leave it there. Now you can see the tip is that nice golden bronze color. We're going to dip it in again to end the tempering process. Now just leave this in here for a couple minutes, and then after a few more minutes you can just dunk the whole thing in there. We want to keep the body of the punch soft so it sustains extended hammer blows, while only the very tip is hard, because that's the part that's going to be moving our material. Then, just to finish off our punch, I like to just give it a quick sand on my belt sander just to get off any excess forge scale that's still stuck to the punch. Then I give it just a very light heat over the flame on my forge, and then I just seal it with some boiled linseed oil. I love that rough forge look. This is actually a mixture of boiled linseed oil and mineral terps. It thins out the linseed oil, so that makes it a lot easier to apply, and it doesn't apply on too thick. So you want it to lightly smoke, just like you can see here. It comes out nice and black, and this will prevent unwanted rust in the future. Sometimes I still get a bit of rust on my tools, just because my garage is quite damp. It's at the bottom of my house, and all the moisture that gathers in my house all tends to gather right down here. Plus it floods when it rains. Oh, it is not an ideal workshop, but it's what I've got, what I'm working with. So there we go. That's our rounding punch forged. Well, that wasn't too bad. Nice easy project, but we're only halfway there. We've still got to forge our drift. But before then, I want to take this time to ask you, oh, hello Nobi. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, who's this? Oh my goodness, who's this? Oh, hello. 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 Oh my goodness. Oh, who's a good girl? Who's a good girl? She wants a cuddle, I think. Now, before we move on to forging our drift, I'd like to ask you if you've enjoyed this video so far, if it's helped you, hit that like button. And if it hasn't helped you, hit that like button too. And let me know in the comments what you would want me to go into after the series is over. After we forge our bottle opener, there's so many different things that we can forge that we can not only use, but also sell. I've also got to teach you how to forge tongs, don't I? But I'm going to do it different than anyone else, because I'm going to make a video on how to make a universal jig that will make forging tongs 1,000,000 times easier than a lot of the other videos show on YouTube. Not to say that they are teaching it wrong, because they are teaching it correctly, but there are easier ways to do it. And we do that with jigs. I've already got some ideas from you guys, but I'd love to know everything that you guys want me to forge, because we will go into it in depth. So our goal with upsetting our material is to widen it out. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to heat the steel up, and then I'm just going to quench probably the one half of it, and then I'm going to hammer down on it. And as I hammer down, that force is going to want to push it outways. That's the only way it can go. The reason why I'm quenching the top is because I'm going to end up tapering that down anyway, so I don't really want that to do the same thing as down at the bottom. I don't want that to widen. And you will notice it does want to kind of bend, and you will have to intermittently straighten it out before heating it back up. So this can be a little bit of a process, but we really want to keep it as straight as we can while we're forging it. If you're working with a thicker coil spring in the beginning, then you won't actually have to do this process. So it really depends what material you're working with. Oh, I hate these tongs. Well, these aren't tongs, these are multi-grips, but channel locks, depending on where you come from. But I kind of have to hold them this way, and my other tongs don't allow me to do that. Okie dokie, that's looking a little bit better. Use my other tongs to straighten it back out. I'm going to heat this back up, straighten it out, and then we're going to work on tapering it out. Hey! Okay, now that this is fairly straightened out, what we have to do now is forge on the struck end. We need it to have a short taper because we want the drift to get wider and then shorter. So once we get it through, it's loose on the material we're working on. It can just fall straight through. Now we only want this to be a very short, maybe a 1/2 inch taper. So we'll forge in, I need to rotate my tongs. I'm gonna forge in a short square taper. Yep. Then we're gonna knock down the corners. These tongs aren't the correct size for the material. They're just a placeholder. But we're gonna have to clean up this end here. I might just give this one more heat and forge it down just a little bit more before we cut it flat. Just gonna round this over as I forge it. It doesn't have to be pretty. Plus I'm running out of daylight. Not that I need daylight, I'm in the garage, I've got lights on. But I would say that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. Before we clean that up, I'm going to forge out the other taper on the other end. Just like our rounding punch, we're going to come to the horn of the anvil to quickly move material. Some really heavy hammer blows to stretch it out. Doesn't hold very well in my tongs, but we will have to make do. Okay, I'm going to give this another heat and carry on. The other reason I'm looking forward to the series being done is I can go back to some mild steel, which is a lot easier to forge than this stuff. Go! Definitely isn't the easiest tool to hold when you don't have tongs to fit. I need to taper this end out some more. It's just really difficult when I don't have much space for my tongs. It's kind of hard because I don't have much space for my tongs, but I need to taper this middle section out some more. This just does not want to hold still. We're getting pretty close. It's kind of the shape of a teardrop. So what I need to do now is we need to make it octagon by knocking down the corners and then round like we did with our rounding punch. On to rounding. Oh. Now I'm going to knock down those edges to bring it closer to round before we fully round it over. Okay, quick clean off. Now we're just going to use our planishing face to round it over, just like we did with the rounding punch. Just light blows, light rapid blows. Whee! Try and keep it as even straight as you can. Now, because the end of our drift is going to be widening the hole that we make with our slot punch, we want to make that kind of flat, almost like a little chisel right at the end. So it goes from flat to round. That way there won't be any gouge marks on the side of the hole. So I'm just going to tap that down right at the end there. Yep. Cool. Okay, we're looking good. Now I just want to check the drift end. I might just heat this up one more time and do a little bit of cleanup with the hammer before we take it over to the sander. Not at a super high heat. Just going to be tapping down any edges that I find. I'm pretty happy with that. It's not perfect, but it'll do. So at this point, I'd let this air cool. Well, ideally you would anneal it by leaving it in the forge, which I do go into in my other videos. So you can watch those after this. But anyway, once it's annealed and cool, we're going to cut off the end. So we've got a nice hammering surface. And then we're going to clean this whole thing up on our belt sander. You could also do this with an angle grinder or a file, but you're just going to have to use a bit more elbow grease. Now we're going to clean the whole body up on the belt sander. I've cleaned it up as much as I can on the belt sander. I think I might just use a flap wheel on my angle grinder to get into those grooves that I can't quite reach. Nice and shiny. Now I don't think I'm going to harden this drift just because it's not going to be punching and moving material. Like, the force isn't on the tip of the drift. The force is going to be around the drift as the drift widens the holes in the material. It's important to make sure it's sanded quite finely, just because you want to reduce as much friction as possible, as this is going to be forced through material. And I don't think I'm going to harden and temper this just because it's not like any force is going on the tip. It's being spread evenly around the drift. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see how it performs in the future. So there we go. This video concludes our beginner smithing tools series, where we learn how to make all the tools we'll need to forge a traditional bottle opener, which we will be forging very soon. So if you want to catch that video, make sure you like and subscribe. But I also noticed my anvil is looking pretty rough. So before we make our bottle opener, I think I'll make an intermediate video where I'll show you how to maintain your anvil and your tools and just smoothing everything out, as you will probably have that issue as I do if you've got a cheap cast iron anvil. But until then, see you next time and have a good night.